Welcome to Policy on Demand. I'm Sindhu Blume. If you're a company with R&D activity, and I imagine most of you watching are, you know that the IRS is going to issue a form to claim the research credit. Now, why are we talking about a form on this show? Because it's kind of a big deal. And joining me to talk more about that is Peter Todd from our New York office. Peter, welcome.
Great to be here with you, Cindy.
So let me start off by saying that we don't typically talk about the release of forms on this show, but this is a pretty big deal. Can you talk about the significance of this and what the implications are?
Yes, Sindhu, thanks for bringing me on. We really wanted to get in front of the audience today to talk about changes that are occurring with the R&D tax credit form that taxpayers use to submit their information about R&D claims to the IRS. The IRS has been working for a project for about 2 years on revising the form, and it represents a significant increase in the amount of information that taxpayers are going to be required to disclose. And we think that these implications are significant enough that taxpayers may need to get input from other stakeholders within the organization, such as the C-suite or the technology department, really to understand what sort of information is being, provided to the IRS in responding to this.
So, Peter, what do we know about the final form and why should companies care?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sindhu. The final form has not, well, it's expected to come out in the next couple months. What we do have is we have a draft form that the IRS released this year, as well as an earlier draft that was provided last year. With respect to the form, in the draft that we can see that the IRS is requesting several new pieces of information. They're requiring that taxpayers disclose the amount of qualified research expend related to officers' compensation. The IRS has not yet provided a definition of what it considers officers' compensation for these purposes. The IRS is also requiring taxpayers to disclose the total number of business components and also describe whether there have been any changes to the trader business, including acquisitions or any new categories of qualified research expenditures that are being included. These last two items are mainly to discern whether or not there should be any sort of base period adjustments. The most significant changes to the form are expected to be optional for the 2024 tax year and mandatory for 2025 tax years. These new requirements require taxpayers to disclose information about the top 50 business components, or 80% of total qualified research expenditures. The information for each of these business components taxpayers are required to provide are a description of the information sought to be discovered with respect to those business components, a categorization of the business component type, and if software, the type of software, as well as new quantitative characteristics such as direct support, research, and direct supervision categories that had never previously been required to be disclosed.
All right. And, the form asks for more information about R&D projects. I'd like you to get into what type of information the government is seeking and how big of a lift is it?
Yeah, the new information that's being required to be disclosed would be, a pretty substantial lift for a lot of taxpayers where they are going to need to really be thoughtful in terms of the type of information that they put into this criteria. When you think about, putting in a description of the items that, the efforts to discover new information, the taxpayers, when this is highly sensitive R&D activities, they'll need to think about what sort of information they want to include and whether other stakeholders in the organization need to be involved, whether that's, technology departments or legal or the C-suite or other groups to weigh in and think about what sort of information they're comfortable disclosing there. Like, just to use as an example, you could consider, a defense contractor or other sorts of industries that are subject to export considerations to think about, legally what kind of information they could put into the form.
All right. And are there any other implications of the form that companies should be aware of or considering?
Yeah, I would say that, one thing that we're really encouraging taxpayers to do as they're getting ready for this form to become live is to do a dry run of the form and think, even if they're not planning to optionally provide the additional information this year, to do, examine the questions, evaluate what responses they would put, and consider what, the most appropriate answers would be there. And we're seeing a lot of taxpayers that are starting that exercise and some that are waiting to see what the actual final form will look like and planning to start the exercise shortly after that.
All right. So from now until the release of the form, how can companies prepare? And are you aware in your conversations with companies have companies started preparing already?
Yeah, that's a great question, Cindy. We've had a lot of conversations with clients lately on, the best way to get positioned to prepare. And we strongly recommend that companies do get prepared by analyzing these questions and thinking about the responses to them. We look at a lot of taxpayers that may not currently have all this information gathered around, and that need to accelerate the timing of collecting this information, thinking about the best way to describe the information. So I do think that that's a strong consideration. I mean, the IRS has indicated that the purpose of the form is, to really be able to use the new risk assessment tools that they're developing to identify, help them become more efficient in identifying what R&D credit claims that they want to look at. So I think there that taxpayers need to be mindful of the purpose of the new questions in the form and being really thoughtful in their responses and making sure that that they're appropriate and limit any unnecessary inquiry on what might be a plain vanilla R&D claim.
I know we'll be following up with more once the form is released. And thank you so much for joining me.
Great. Thank you, Cindy.
And to our audience, as always, thank you so much for joining us. Take care.